Hi everyone, it's Donna here from Succeed with Dyslexia for a really inspirational conversation with somebody who is one of my inspirations, one of my heroes. It's Flohr MBE. Hi Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Donna. It's lovely to see you again.
I know, it's brilliant to work together, isn't it, Sue? We've got lots to talk about, and thank you so much for agreeing to this. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about who exactly you are. But first of all, I just want to make it clear to everybody that your MBE was for services to the dyslexia community. So before we start, I just want to say a huge thank you for all your service over the years to the dyslexia community from us here at Succeed with Dyslexia. So thank you. And I know that you are still so committed to working with those with dyslexia. And we'll talk about all your many different endeavours during our conversation, I think. So, Sue, set the scene then for our listeners in terms of who you are and your journey over the years as a professional with dyslexia.
Well, thank you, Donna. Thanks for that introduction. I think it was always a shock to me to get the MBE. And at first, I didn't find it easy using it. Perhaps that's because I have imposter syndrome that you're going to talk about later on. But it wasn't achieved alone. I had wonderful colleagues all the way along in my career. And it's a shame that it can only be given to one person, because without teamwork and a whole sector behind us, we can't achieve anything. And everything that's been achieved has been with a joint effort from all people in our community. So I think I'm, holding it there for everyone really, and all the people that I've worked with along the line. So what do you want to know about me, really? I am.
Well, it's tough because we know each other, isn't it? It's lovely to have a chat like this. I mean, you're so typically modest, and it's so like you to talk of others. The MBE I know is thoroughly deserved, but I know you're way too modest to admit that. But you've spent many decades during your illustrious career at the British Dyslexia Association, haven't you, as head of the helpline and head of policy and so on. Beyond the job title, so to speak, Sue, tell us a little bit about what that entailed over those many decades of hard work.
Well, alongside that as well, I have studied to be a specialist dyslexia specialist, an assessor, a needs assessor. I've taught in primary, secondary, further education and higher education, and helped dyslexics in those sectors. I think the most enjoyable part of it all was working with the helpline at the BDA and helping people, and actually the practical side. So much can be done with just a telephone call or just an email, setting a person on the right track. And it's so hard for people to make that initial contact. So they have to be admired for actually taking that step. And I think we can gain great satisfaction from helping people in that way more than any other way, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's the real practical part and authentic and real part of what you do, isn't it? And like you said, a phone call or an email. For those listeners who aren't sure about the helpline, it's open to all, isn't it, Sue? And you can just reach out and contact the volunteers and the team there.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, making that initial step and finding the first step of how to help oneself is a really good move. Obviously, you can't plan people's entire way forward, but an initial step is a great thing.
Yeah, which is really important, actually, considering what the theme of the conversations that we've been having here at Succeed with Dyslexia recently about mental health, well-being, the importance of reaching out to people like yourselves. I know you've pulled away now from BDA and you're going on new adventures as a dyslexia consultant, but the team that you set up, Sue, is very much still there for those listening to this conversation who still want some support, isn't it? So, you've given us a good hint there and a nice overview of your professional qualifications and your expertise and so on. I'd like to change the conversation slightly now and talk about you as an individual, if you like. And this leads on to some of the things I know we want to talk today about, which is imposter syndrome, because I know you've been very open over the years about your own dyslexia. So again, for our listeners, Sue, could you just give us an overview of your journey with dyslexia as an individual, when you got assessed, how that impacted on you as well?
Yeah, I think when you first mentioned imposter syndrome, I had to look it up to make sure I knew what I was talking about. I think, as with many dyslexics, we think we might know what words mean, and we just skim over them and perhaps go off on the wrong track. So it really was an eye-opener to me to talk to you at first about imposter syndrome. Like, oh gosh, if I'd have known what it really was, perhaps I would have had a better understanding of me. I wasn't diagnosed until I was quite old, really. I had a family with many children who were all dyslexic, a husband who was dyslexic, but I wasn't quite sure that I was dyslexic because I had a really good education. But I was always feeling that I didn't quite achieve as much as people expected me to, and perhaps I was considered as lazy or distracted and disinterested. And it wasn't until I was quite old and doing some more studying a foreign language, that I decided that I needed to get assessed. And it was a bit of a cheat, really, because I thought, well, if I'm assessed, I'll be able to use a computer and it will put all the accents on for me, because I could never know where to put accents with foreign languages. And yet dyslexics sometimes are considered not to be good at languages, but I could speak quite a few of them, but actually writing them was a tricky business. So I got myself assessed and was quite disbelieving, really, when I did get the result, but it confirmed a lot. And I found out I had it confirmed that I was dyslexic. And I think had I had that early on, perhaps I wouldn't have had imposter syndrome. Perhaps I would have had a better understanding of myself. I think it's really important to get diagnosed early so that you can learn to work with your strengths rather than your weaknesses, or improve on your weaknesses. But for me, it was really late. And I think by that time, I probably had poor self-esteem, unnecessarily, didn't really begin. If somebody tells you you're bad at something and keeps telling you, eventually you begin to believe it yourself, don't you? So I think had I known a lot earlier, I would have done things quite a lot differently. Yeah. So
it's really moving to hear you talk like that, Sue, because we've known each other for a long while, and I know how amazing and accomplished and awesome you are. And it's a surprise to hear that behind that lies this self-doubt and this kind of self-criticism and so on, I guess, which is all part and parcel, isn't it, of this idea of an imposter syndrome, feeling that you're not quite good enough in some way. You spoke there about had you been identified earlier, and again, tapping into your wisdom around what you know about dyslexia. Do you feel that is an important issue, that if we know as soon as possible, ideally in childhood at some point, it can really make a difference in your life?
absolutely, because I think one knows deep down that you're trying hard, and teachers or family or friends have a different perspective and think you can't be bothered. And actually, to know that there's a reason why you're not why you're not hard to describe, why you're not achieving results that deep down you feel you should be. I think that really helps.
Yeah.
And it helps if other people can understand and not have a misconception about you. Because if they always are saying you're not trying when you are, it can rub off, and in the end you think, well, no, perhaps I am not trying like other people.
Yeah. And, to hear you talk like that, I know that how personal this is for you, and I'm incredibly grateful, as we all are, that you're sharing this, because, it helps others to listen to somebody like you. If you can experience this, Sue, anybody can. In terms of the imposter syndrome, then, which ties into what we're saying here about finding out later than maybe is the ideal situation to be in, and have these doubts and so on. How do you feel that impacted on you as a woman, a professional woman, a very accomplished woman? So having this self-doubt, or this feeling, that you hear a lot of individuals talk about with imposter syndrome, I shouldn't be here. I'm going to be found out at any moment. This is not where I should be. And as I say, from the outside, looking at you, and we've worked together for many years, I know how brilliant you are. And when we started to talk about this, Sue, I was flabbergasted that this was how you felt on the inside. So if you don't mind, and I know it's incredibly personal, but if you don't mind talking about how that imposter syndrome impacted on you.
I think it can manifest as anxiety, and people not being, well, not just speaking about me, but people not being aware of why they're suffering from anxiety. I've in my career assessed many people with anxiety for needs assessments, and often, because of my qualifications, I can tell that they actually have an underlying specific learning difficulty, and that really might be what's causing the anxiety. So anxiety can manifest itself in all different ways. I mean, with migraines, stomach aches,
panic attacks. I mean, we get from the physical to then disrupted sleep and so on, isn't it?
But when one feels good about oneself, I don't think you have these feelings. And so I think it's really important to be able to understand your strengths. And this will come out of a diagnosis, actually, and make people feel better. A lot of anxiety can be shed if people have a better understanding of themselves and self-belief, and get rid of that poor self-esteem feeling. We're all good at something, and I think it's finding what we're good at that makes us well and makes us feel good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's thank you for sharing that. So that's you as a person. And obviously we said earlier in the chat that you were, managing and part of the British Dyslexia Association's helpline team for many, many years. What you're sharing there, Sue, does that echo with all the voices over the years that you've heard on the other end of the phone, in emails and so on? Talk to us a little bit about, some of the experiences you've had with helpline regarding supporting the dyslexic community and mental health.
Yeah, it wasn't a mental health helpline, but obviously the people that rang or still ring often are suffering from anxiety and panic attacks because they don't feel good. And these are adults I'm talking about, who don't feel good in the workplace, feel insecure, feel that they're first in line for losing their jobs, especially, over the pandemic, the last few years with redundancies and so forth. And I think it's has a big effect on the dyslexic community and those with poor self-esteem. So I think it's really important to have a lot of awareness in organisations, and to be able to speak freely about dyslexia, to feel confident that you know what you are good at, and can work on that, and be able to talk to colleagues and managers about your disability. So, we have a lot of that on the helpline, and I think it's important that we're able to talk to people about getting that message across to their colleagues and to their line managers that there is no shame in being dyslexic. You can do a good job as long as you're in the right job. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And with that, all that support you say, Sue, and the conversations and the support are so important, aren't they? Another conversation that we're having a lot these days is around women and dyslexia. And obviously, you're a very high profile woman who also has dyslexia. What's been your experiences as a woman in that way, as a professional? But also, I'm wondering if you don't mind sharing, I also know that you're a mother of children with dyslexia and a grandmother of grandchildren with dyslexia. So if you don't mind sharing your thoughts on for you as a woman first, and then, in your role as a mom and a grandmother as well.
Oh, that's quite a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot, but I'm sure you can do it. Do you think, well, let's break it down. Do you feel, is it easier now to be a woman with dyslexia than what it was at the beginning of your career? Do we have better understanding now, or are we still a long way to go?
I think we still have got a long way to go with understanding how it affects people in their careers. People often choosing the wrong career. We did find that on the helpline. It's really important to understand, I think, what you are good at. Doesn't matter what sex you are. But in schools, there's probably still the perception that more boys have dyslexia than girls, and so perhaps girls are really quiet about their weaknesses. And are not so.
Is that what happened to you, Sue, when you were at school? You kind of, I know you didn't know at that point you had dyslexia, but for your areas of struggle, did you kind of go under the radar?
I think perhaps, yeah, but I was quite lucky to have a good education. I don't think it really came out until much later that I was dyslexic. But I think, from my experience of teaching, boys are more demonstrative and girls are quieter and so are not so often picked up. And also, I think now that teaching is becoming better with the way that we teach to read and help with phonics, it can be quite late that people are now being discovered with dyslexia, even though there's a lot more awareness. Does that make sense?
It does, yes, it
there's
does.
a lot more awareness. Now that we've changed teaching methods and phonics are being taught in the classroom, it's not always so obvious that there is an issue until much later on. Because other strategies are not being introduced in the classroom. Too much concentration on phonics. And so as words become more difficult to read, children don't have the strategies to be able to break them down and read. And this is an issue now.
Mm. And I guess in these, in our modern education ways, then these are issues that are impacting on your grandchildren, isn't it? Because I know they're currently at school.
And especially the pandemic that we've had,
yes.
So much has been hidden and maybe observed by some parents during the pandemic when they were at home, and when children were at home and parents could see the difficulties that children were actually having, but also they missed out an awful lot on classroom contact. And yeah, I think that this will have a lasting effect on some children. Yeah.
Yes, it's really concerning, isn't it? And this is why the work that you continue to do as a consultant and that you've done with Helpline, and Helpline is there as well, as we said, is so important, really, because of what's happening and will continue to happen. Do you feel then, you said earlier you've got dyslexia through your family, obviously you, your children, grandchildren. Over the years then, Sue, as you've seen things develop, do you feel optimistic from where we're heading now? You've just spoke about our current education system, good in some ways, but sounds like maybe children are still falling through the cracks. Do we feel that we're in a good place now, or better than we were, but still work to go.
There's
What are your
still
thoughts on that?
such a long way to go, and I'm really sad that it's still happening.
Yeah.
I
Well, you shared a story with me, Sue, that one of the founding members of the British Dyslexia Association, and the BDA is 50 years old this year, so it's been around for a long while, was a pioneer woman.
Yeah.
And was it right you told me one time that she thought that the BDA was just going to be something for a little while?
It was what
And we
I was
still
going to
need
say,
it.
Donna. You know, I feel like I'm a pioneer myself. I've been
Yes,
in
you are.
so long, and I really didn't want to see it happen to my grandchildren. I thought, you know, having struggled with my own children, that was it. And to see it all happening again and coming round full circle, it's really sad for me. And not to be there to be able to support them with all that I know, because we don't live close by. It's horrible. It's horrible. The word may be out there now, and people may know what it means. Not like imposter syndrome, but they don't actually understand all the implications of being dyslexic. It just filters through to life. It's just not just about reading and writing. I feel incredibly sad for those of my 10 grandchildren that are dyslexic. There's only a handful that they got to have a struggle where the others haven't. And for me, it was always a struggle. I thought everybody struggled, but they don't. And so seeing two sides now, half with it and half without, is really sad for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first encounter with the word dyslexia was with a flatmate, and she'd been brought up in different families because she was fostered, and she was a troublesome girl, and she had been diagnosed, and so I was probably in my 20s when I was living with her, and so it was all new to me, dyslexia then, and this was the first person I'd ever heard of that was dyslexic. And she used to have spoonerisms even at that age, you know, park and cup tea. I don't know, I can't remember now, but everything was backwards. And I thought that's what dyslexia was. And I feel really sad that all these years on, you know, life is going to be hard for my grandchildren. Yeah.
Still a long way to go, I think
Yeah.
so. And that's why these types of conversations, the work that you continue to do, the work the British Dyslexia Association does, and charities and organisations all over the world, it's still important. There's still a long way to go here. Do you feel, because I know, you know, we've talked a bit about imposter syndrome during this chat. Do you feel then that as we do understand more about dyslexia, I know we're still a long way to go, this idea of not feeling good enough and so on, which is part and parcel of that imposter syndrome phenomena, will that dissipate, do you think, as people understand dyslexia more? Or do you feel that it's still part of having dyslexia, you know, feeling that you're not quite good enough and, you know, there's low self-esteem?
It's really important. Emotional intelligence is really important. And I think support from family and friends is vital to make people feel good about themselves, to avoid the anxiety, the panic attacks, and make sure that people are not suffering from mental health difficulties because of dyslexia. Finding that key thing that they are good about, focusing on it, and especially for parents to make sure that they find something their children are really good at and encourage that, and not to fall into this trap of poor self-esteem and mental health problems. I think that is really important.
Yeah. The wise words, Sue. So in your opinion, that's one of the keys, is to find the things that you're good at. Is that what you tried to do as a mum with your own children?
Yeah, and to introduce strategies and to encourage them to be able to use technology as well. More and more of the same thing doesn't often help, and children get bored as well, going over and over learning. I think one of the good things that has come along is technology, and so much can be done. And the earlier it's introduced, I think the better. Yeah, to keep people on an even par. That's for reading and writing, of course, and for day-to-day living. I think that is so important.
So that's an exciting area.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to you as a woman who was identified, how did you figure out what worked for you? I hear what you're saying about you as a mum with your own children, as a grandmother, but who was there for you during that time? Or did you have to figure it out pretty much on your own?
That's the problem. Yeah, I did have to probably figure it out for myself, and it took a long time to figure out. I remember going away on holiday with a friend when I was 40, and she said, "You should write lists." And I said, "Lists? That's really sad. That will spoil my creativity." But had I done that, just a simple thing like that, life might have been a lot easier. No, I had to work things out for myself, and it took a very, very long time. And I'm glad that sometimes my children listen to me and do things earlier than I did. Yeah.
And, that journey you've been on, Sue, makes you so great as the professional that you are, and, so wise because of all the experiences you've had. And I know you've been a real mentor to me over the years, which I'm so appreciative of. As we close the conversation then, and we started to kind of do this naturally, I think, what thoughts or words of wisdom that you want to share with people who are listening to this conversation, thinking, actually, that sounds like me. I experience feelings where I feel like an imposter, despite being, a very accomplished person, or I'm worried about my children or grandchildren. I know you talked about thinking about what we call now superpowers, what you're good at, concentrating on that, and the technology as well, Sue, you've hinted at. Anything else in terms of people who are listening to this thinking, help, I don't know which way to turn?
Yeah, I think don't be afraid to talk about what concerns you. I'm very grateful to all the people that have helped me along the way, and we're all good at different things. I can think of lots of things that will make things better, but I need those friends to help me to put things into place and for it to happen. And that's been the same with policy all along. To get change takes a very long time, but I couldn't have done it without people actually helping to put the things in place. And I think we need to work as a team and not as an individual, work with our friends and families and to support each other, and then everybody can get there and be happy.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said there. And, you spoke then about a policy level, so working at government level here in the UK, which you did for many years, campaigning for change and so on. I guess the other part of this is about the lived experience and that authentic voice. So apart from being a very accomplished professional lady, you know of what you speak of, don't you? You have an authentic voice and that lived experience, isn't it?
Experience.
How important do you think that was when you've been in these rooms with these very important people, that you know what you're speaking of?
I think it's really helpful to have that understanding. I don't think people who are not dyslexic actually understand what it really feels like and the struggles that people have. And yet those people with dyslexia think it's quite normal and everybody else is feeling that way and struggling. And sometimes it's really hard for parents or the parent who is not dyslexic to understand that their child is really trying hard, and not to think that that they're just being lazy and difficult. And yeah, it's been good for me to know what it feels like, and good for me to have that support network around me.
Yeah. It is, and I suppose that's another part of the jigsaw here, Sue, from on top of everything else you've shared, is to be proud of who you are and your authentic voice. We talk a lot about that these days, don't we? Which is really positive, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to go forward now and help those people with practical support.
Yeah.
And
Well, I wouldn't expect anything less from you. Uh, so, yeah, there's exciting adventures ahead still for you, Sue. We really still need you here in the UK. So I'm so glad that you will continue now as a consultant and use all those, that wisdom and your expertise to continue to serve the dyslexia community. I'm going to end the chat as I started by saying thank you. Thank you for your service. As I said, on a very personal level, you've been a fantastic colleague and mentor to me over the years. I've learnt so much from you. You're an amazing woman. And yes, isn't it interesting? We had a chat ages ago, just the two of us, about imposter syndrome. And here we are now broadcasting that. But we do it because we hope it resonates with other people, isn't it, who might be feeling the same way.
I feel so much better now you've told me what it means. Thank you.
Well, that's a great note to end this conversation on, Sue. So thank you. For our listeners, we hope you've got a lot from this chat. We did this for a reason, because we wanted, hopefully, to reflect back some of the experiences that you guys might experience around imposter syndrome and well-being around your dyslexia. I think everything that Sue has shared with us, we totally support here at Succeed with Dyslexia as well. So keep in touch. It is great to know that Sue is still out there fighting the good fight. So thank you, Sue. And we'll say goodbye to everyone for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video as much as we did putting it together. Now we have some more fantastic content for you. Please feel free to click this link here and learn more about Felice Muni, the founder of a school in Kenya that helps individuals with learning difficulties and differences. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching.